I'm here playing Kaiserreich in Hearts of Iron 4. Some people in the past had told me to play it, and that's pretty much the only reason I'm here. I have this vague vibe in my memory that people had said this was a good mod. So here I am playing it. There were actually two problems that I encountered early on that were almost shocking. The first was the loading time, which is out of control, easily the longest load time on any gaming experience I've ever had. And well, I guess I was a little bit surprised that Kaiserreich isn't very different to Hearts of Iron 4. You might consider it not really a complaint to say that I ended up playing Hearts of Iron 4 after booting up heartsofiron4.exe. I guess I came in here expecting it to be more different to normal Hearts of Iron 4. Well, it's very similar basically. I think I'm spoiled because I have really had tons of experience in Hearts of Iron 4 playing with the historical AI off and deliberately doing weird things and even using console commands to make weird scenarios. And what Kaiserreich is just another weird scenario, and it's not necessarily more different to the weird things I'd set up before. So anyway, we're basically going to play a little game of Hearts of Iron 4 in a different scenario that's not very historical. So, you can see I've chosen to play as the Papal States. The reason for that was, well, it was after looking at their focus tree, after checking them out and being like, someone's put some effort into making it so that you can play as the Papal States, I'm gonna go for it and see what happens. Early on, you have to pick a new pope, and this defines the direction you can take your campaign in. Essentially, there are two main paths to take. You either become more theocratic or less theocratic, and we're going to go down the less theocratic route because I like some of the directions that allows you to go in later. Effectively, our goal is to not be the Papal States anymore, to separate the Pape and the state a little bit. And we'll progress towards that with the focus you see in the top left currently being worked on, the Senate and Kingdom of Rome. We can reform Rome as a city-state like in the good old days, and then it will be time to reform the Roman Empire. So that's immediately where we're going with this. We are actually under threat right now because Italy is in a bit of a situation because of the alternate starting conditions. We've got the Socialist Republic of Italy on our doorstep. They are, well, syndicalists as the game calls them, a Western version of socialists that are all very democratic and votey. We don't like that because it's not what God intended, I suppose. But, well, perhaps we don't care so much about what God intended anymore because we are now, all of a sudden, Rome. Our faction name has changed, we get a new banner, and most importantly, we get new focuses that let us build a few free factories, which is critical because we start with basically no capacity to do anything. We can't really produce any military equipment, and we can't build things. Although we're not in such a dire situation as something like Luxembourg, because we are a vassal of the yellow faction next to us. That's two Sicilies, basically a sort of old-school conservative-style version of Italy that's controlling the southern half. There's the more communist-y northern half, but there's also an Italian Republic faction in the corner that we'll see later. One thing I need to do before anything really happens is try to get some sort of army composition going, gradually build up army experience by just training and doing focuses, and doing things like putting artillery in the army and increasing the size of the army. But long before any of that was finished, some war broke out because I think my vassal master, Two Sicilies, actually declared war on our northern neighbours, the Socialist Republic. So, we're at war, and that could be an issue because we're invaded immediately, and our divisions aren't very good. They're very small divisions and they don't have many weapons because we can't make weapons, basically. So we just have to hold out somehow. Looks like our defender's advantage will get us somewhere. I did take the entrenchment military doctrine, so we have better entrenchment than usual, meaning we're more powerful than usual if we don't move, which is going to suit us right now. I also discovered now that we have an air force, didn't realise we had one until this point. We can't really use it though because our fuel income is so low, we can't even sustain a training program for that many pilots. So the air force didn't really come in very useful. And the war on the ground didn't go that well either. We start to be pushed back, and our allies coming from Two Sicilies and some troops from Austria as well were also gradually beaten back. we are part of the Reichspakt, which is one of the big alliances on the world stage. We're basically on the side of the German Empire, in a world that is divided vaguely along World War I style lines, but with the twist that many of the old Entente factions are now socialist style things that are their own third faction. We'll look into that later because, as you might have noted, we've barely moved the camera. Nothing else happening in the world matters right now. We just have to not lose the campaign immediately, that's the challenge. And it is going poorly so far. We've lost half of our territory and the other half is under constant attack. However, we do now have better divisions. While it's not really obvious, we're getting stronger and stronger because more and more of our manpower is being put into our small number of units. We also have this national focus, armed citizenry, that makes it easier to recruit new troops and gives us 2 divisions of free troops that just spawn out of nowhere. Although they are militia divisions that are small and useless. But at this stage, that's just meat in the seats, more things defending our front line. And because a wider war is forming around us right now, the Socialist Republic isn't really participating that much in the offensive later on. Other factions are. I think we've got some French communists mainly attacking us here. But the point I'm making is, not that many troops really came to this front line right here, and we ended up outnumbering them while also defending, so we were basically fine, giving me yet more time to keep building up our divisions, putting artillery in and getting the support companies going. We still struggle because we don't have artillery guns, but we did get some Lend-Lease to fill out some of our missing stock. We're also researching field hospitals there, and that's going to be a useful thing for us, because it will stop us dying quite so much. We're going to have limited manpower with only one city to draw our recruits from, so we'll try to keep them alive. That might also be what God intended as well. So we lack stuff, in particular artillery, but in theory our divisions are kind of good now, and we put it to the test with a timing attack basically, because we were constantly under attack from the north. All we have to do is counterattack just as their attacks end and their organisation is at its minimum, and we'll actually have a good chance of pushing the enemy back. And indeed that works. We soon see ourselves retaking the territory we lost earlier. Now things start to feel a bit more stable and less dodgy. We're less on the verge of being destroyed, and furthermore, we actually take some of the territory that was held by the enemy in the beginning, so we've theoretically made some progress here. I think 2 Sicilies still might be losing out. Maybe they're getting their act together now as well, and some of our other allies from elsewhere will be showing up and throwing in more troops to this mess. So basically, I now had a micro battle where I'm looking for those little opportunities where sometimes one tile in the enemy's front line is weaker than the rest or can be attacked from more directions than the rest, that sort of thing. And by paying close attention, even with only a small number of divisions, you can slowly push your front line back by constantly making advantageous attacks now and again. So we do that and we get to here, and we are further boosted enormously by the fact that the Green faction to the north, the Italian Republic, a sort of liberal old school faction, is also fighting the Socialist Republic at the same time. So while we're not allied to them, we can't see what they're doing. They're doing something in the enemy's back lines that's also going to be damaging them. Meaning the situation is all looking pretty good, and from here it seemed like we were surely going to destroy the Socialist Republic. Well, it didn't quite go that way. Firstly, we do need to concern ourselves at last with what's going on in the world, because some World War II-like stuff is beginning to happen. We've essentially got the Axis fighting the Soviets, but the Soviets are called the Moscow Accord and they're not socialist. And then on the other side of the Axis we have the former Entente, which now is socialist. Not to be confused with the actual Entente, which still exists. It's sort of parts of the Entente that didn't revolt and go socialist after World War I, that sort of thing. So there are more factions than in old World War II, but the effect is kind of the same in the end. We end up having a two-sides conflict, where it's, for all intents and purposes, our Reichspakt against the Third Internationale, which is effectively the Entente. So we're fighting with, say, France and Britain as Italy, so it's kind of like we're in the Axis. And things didn't go very well as things ramped further and further up. And I couldn't quite tell why at first. I noticed we were losing ground and some of our divisions were falling back, despite not having lost all of their organisation, and I knew some classic Hearts of Iron 4 shenanigans were afoot. At first, I started monitoring the battles, thinking this could be something to do with our old friend Combat Width, the mysterious stat that can prevent you from fighting. It's actually the other mysterious stat that prevents you from fighting, the reserves system. So most of our troops are held in reserve at the start of a fight. But then we have this debuff from above division limit that debuffs our chance to have the reserves ever fight down below 0, and that's why we effectively can't hold the front line. So what's going on here is that in Kaiserreich there is a division limit, but it's not a limit on how many divisions you can deploy. It's a limit on whether it debuffs you in such a way if you have more than that many divisions. So we have 10 out of 7. That means all of our probability of taking part in a fight has been eliminated. I always disliked this RNG-based joining a fight system, and here, well, it's just crippled us. So what I've done is effectively gotten rid of many of my troops, and this counterintuitively makes us quite a lot stronger because it allows the existing troops to remember to fight, and now we hold the front line and even start pushing the enemy back again. However, we do face naval invasions. You can see I actually dedicated 2 units to defending Rome's docks against a possible naval invasion. The issue is, Rome itself is a separate tile, and 1 unit just lands straight into the city, and with that, we capitulate instantly, because we don't have much territory. Losing anything reduces our victory score so much that we just instantly surrender with no choice. So there you go, we just got knocked out just like that. It wasn't all over though, because our allies could still put us back by just easily crushing that small naval invasion force. They do crush it, but they choose not to put us back, and we are knocked out of the game entirely with a score of 0. That's what we like to see. So I had to go back to an earlier save and try this again, dedicating 3 units now to defending our home territory against naval invasion, not bothering to defend in the north at all, and all of our remaining troops go to the south to defend against another invasion coming from the Socialist Republic that has taken over Sicily and is trying to push into Italy. So now the situation isn't so good because we lack potential options for doing things, and making its reappearance in an off-ED complaint about Hearts of Iron 4 video, it's the supply system. And again, Kaiserreich does change the supply system. I had hoped for the better from what I saw, but in practice, we're still going to have issues. Essentially, this mod allows you to draw supplies from locations other than your capital if you build a supply base, and you can use railways to speed up the movement of supplies on top of the usual infrastructure system that moves them around. However, actually building a supply base is nearly impossible for us because you need loads of civilian factories to do it for some reason. I think I checked and it would take us something like 700 days to build a supply base versus say 100 and something days to make a military factory. So I don't know why they were so hard to build for us, possibly because I was trying to build it in somebody else's territory, maybe that debuffs you. So I couldn't put a base down here somewhere, we couldn't upgrade the railway or anything like that, and our troops just started gradually deorganizing and even dying off a little bit from lack of supplies on this one tile in particular. If I moved 1 tile back, I would be fine. It's a case where the problem is solvable somewhat, but even if I did manage to get the infrastructure in, the AI would probably just dump more troops there and use up all the supplies anyway. You can't coordinate with the AI when it comes to supplies, because I think the AI just doesn't care about supplies as far as I remember people telling me in the comments, and it causes all kinds of issues. Essentially, we had to give up on that front, but things went better up north this time. We pushed the Republic further back, and we're able to capture the coastline here, so we have this port to supply us, and of course the enemy have less territory to re-recruit and work with. Although pushing this way doesn't help us immensely, because we're also fighting France at the same time, so exposing ourselves to the west here means we're now bordering France as well, and it's just more territory we can be attacked from. Well, we sat there fighting for a little bit. I eventually went back to the southern front and pushed past the tile with no supplies on it. It seemed our allies were doing some work here, so I stepped in at the last second to make a no supplies push and finish off the enemy pocket here. It can't move, so they're all going to be completely destroyed. That's a very efficient engagement, and we did go on to take all of Sicily as well. But the more important move happened up north, when I rushed over here to break through the front line when I noticed the enemy's general movements left a temporary weakness. I punched through to go straight for their capital. This is kind of dangerous because if we walk 2 tiles ahead of our front line and make this big salient, the enemies to either side can come in and close that off, and then we'll have no supplies, and if we take a fight, we'll be deleted. That said, we're going to do it anyway. I'm trying to shorten the front line to make our guys walk backwards automatically less. All I need to do is take Turin, and as you can see, we happen to have pushed in while it's only occupied by troops that just retreated from our push. So we actually take it quite easily, and that just resolves the situation entirely. We knock the Italian Socialist Republic out of the war, although we still have this pocket, as you can see, of various other countries' troops that are sitting in their former territory. So we need to take them down, which will actually take a while because there's loads of them in this tiny pocket. But yes, we've achieved something. The problem is, because we've been drawn into World War II, our little Italian war of reunification isn't going to end anytime soon, because now it's also dependent on the result of the effective Axis versus Third International War going on. So now we're just going to participate in that. I spent a good 10 minutes gradually whittling down the pocket and killing off all the divisions here. Another efficient battle where we're going to be mass wiping out enemy troops for relatively low casualties, so making dangerous assaults doesn't matter too much. And after that, well, it's time to push into France. You can see our allies have already got started on that, and I've even sent a unit over myself to help. We need to somehow knock France out of the war. My main plan was to stay near the coast, near the ports in particular. I don't want to move away from the supply lines because I'm too paranoid. I've played this game enough as a small force among a bigger force, where the bigger force takes all the supplies. Plus, taking out France's coastline here is strategically useful, because Spain is neutral, so if we can move the battle line down to there, we'll have a secure flank. We get most of the way and do the business. We have to hold on quite strongly because the AI isn't following us particularly closely with the rest of their divisions. We're not necessarily shortening the line here, we're probably making it longer, so it's a bit hard to hold. But it doesn't really matter, because here's what eventually happens. While trying to hang on to that strip, a peace treaty occurs, and I didn't expect this to happen. This is the peace treaty for our original war. I didn't think it could go through, but it actually does. And we don't have the player-led peace treaties mod enabled. Essentially in this game you have 2 choices for how the peace treaties work. Either nothing happens at all and you don't participate, or you install the player peace treaties mod, which is effectively just cheating. It's the opposite, where you can take everything on the table, which can be quite a lot. And I really hate that. It's just such a game-ruining feature for me. Essentially what's happened here is that by using the default peace treaty system, we are not permitted to be, well, present, quote-unquote, at the peace treaty. We're here, but we had no say in anything, and there's a massive limitation on what you actually can ask for in peace treaties. So if everything that's already possible to ask for has been asked for, you can't ask for anything, no matter how much war score you have, and it just ends with literally nothing having happened. So that's a bit of a disappointment, and I was just like, oh my god, I forgot, here's another reason I don't like Hearts of Iron 4. I always remember myself as liking the game, and then I play it and realise I actually have all these things that annoy me greatly. I guess there's no other game that's similar but solves those problems, so I seem to come crawling back to it for some reason. Well anyway, here's my new plan. We had a decision we could make, which allows us to declare independence from 2 Sicilies. This effectively did nothing. I thought we might end up at war with them, but they just let us go. One effect though is it resets our diplomacy, so we're out of the war, or actually just a neutral power now sitting in our little corner, and we don't necessarily have to do anything. But what I wanted to do was take revenge and start finding a way for me to attack 2 Sicilies, and that's why I'm now researching who those guys we were fighting just now even are, hoping that maybe I could join their faction somehow. Looks like it's not going to happen. Union of Britain here has Sylvia Pankhurst as the leader, a big voting fan. She probably isn't going to like my idea of having a religiously selected god emperor rule the world. Well, maybe someone else will like the idea. Essentially, I looked around, didn't find any opportunities to join any of the major factions, so we remain a neutral power just sitting on our own. And the question is, can we do anything against effectively the Reichspakt, because we'll have to fight everybody in that alliance to fight Two Sicilies. Well, clearly I intended to do something, because I'm staking a claim here to a core state I have that is in Two Sicilies' territory. So we're preparing for war, but there's not that much we can do to prepare really, because we don't have factories and we don't have many people. We can't get a stronger army, but I thought maybe Two Sicilies will actually start losing because of the war situation in general. So that's why I'm looking around here, trying to find out what's happening in the world. China's just doing its thing. We don't need to worry too much about that. Japan's got a bit of an empire going. USA is also doing a China-style thing. They've fractured into 4 different states. We've got a West Coast, Pacific States of America that appears to be dominating most of the land mass. And then there's also a syndicalist version, an old school version, and some kind of Floridan version American Union state. Maybe that's a Confederacy 2.0 style thing coming back. Well, basically they're not going to be participating in our war because they're not joining the factions. They're just doing their own thing. So my dream of somehow getting the USA to sweep in and save me isn't going to happen, unfortunately. Then something happened while I wasn't paying attention. Two Sicilies are dead, both of them, and it looks like it's because of this thing that's now being offered to me. The Italian Republic can offer the other Italian factions to become part of it to create a unified Italy. Two Sicilies took the deal, and now we have the option to do so as well. If you do take the deal, it ends up putting you here, where you actually control the Italian Republic. So we've effectively changed faction, and to some extent, this would be a good idea. We just became a lot more powerful by somehow taking control of all of this stuff. But it just feels like cheating, feels like bringing up the console and just changing who you are. And also, I didn't really want to play on as Italian Republic, because even though it would be quite good, you're sort of intended to win with a real faction. I always play this game in ways where you're not necessarily intended to do very well, just to see what happens. Plus, I would have to clean up their enormous mess where they've got all these different tiny armies with 1 or 2 divisions, and go through all of their divisions and just generally sort them out, that sort of thing. And I didn't want to, so we go back to a previous save and make the opposite decision. We've not agreed to be annexed. Instead, we're going to start fortifying the Roman city-state, because I expected this would lead to trouble in some way. Here's some good news coming in. Germany is having issues with Russia. If Russia can bring down part of the Reichspakt for us, then we might be able to hold on a bit. Ideally, this is how we get through this situation. We get all of Italy's allies to get destroyed in war, making it easy for us to fight Italy. Well, that didn't happen, and for whatever reason I ran out of patience. I don't really know. Looking back at the footage, I don't understand why I did this move, but I did. I just randomly decided to start the war. We're not ready, we have no chance of victory here, but for whatever reason I did it, and I really don't know why. I think I might have been trying to stir up drama or something. So anyway, now we're at war with the entire Reichspakt, and that's going to be an issue as many factions, all of which are much bigger than us, show up to contest this new front line they've got, and we immediately lose part of our territory. But this strip near the coast holds much better because we have our forces concentrated, the area is fortified, and there aren't that many enemies, although you can see I don't have any encryption or decryption technology, so we actually can't see what's attacking us. But it looks like it's not enough to push us off this set of tiles. With this, we now just sit back and hope that us being here, causing a distraction, will have a chain reaction that brings down Italy and their allies, and that's the way in which we'll win. We've got 15 divisions distracted, so maybe they'll be not being so successful on the other front lines because of that, and we are bringing down a few troops as they come in to attack us with unfavourable battles. In this way, we might eventually war of attrition our way back to having the enemy be weak enough that we can advance and take that claimed territory, bringing us slightly closer to reforming the Holy Roman Empire. Well, we've still got a long way to go, and we're still actually behind where we started, effectively. We have less territory than when we started, although we are now an independent, fully independent Roman city-state, so we've got that under our belts at least. While we're basically stuck here, one thing we can try to get more powerful while still respecting the division limit is to make our divisions twice as big. Now this doesn't necessarily make you more powerful always, because of the complicated, overly complicated I'd say, way in which what you put in a division translates to what that division can do. But I think this is better probably. Well, at the very least, we've used up more of our manpower. So we have more people in the field without being debuffed due to a technicality. Always the best way to achieve anything. Although it is worth noting it does destroy our experience level doing that, because when you add divisions or add companies to a division, it doesn't train them, they're just thrown in untrained, so it dilutes the experience level. That's inconvenient. Well, there's plenty of fighting to be had, so we can get trained up there. We're facing naval invasions as well as ground invasions, but we are holding all the time, so Rome lives on. Our stats are 1,000 times higher than the enemies in these naval landing battles, so even with barely anything here, we can hold them off. The bad news though is that what I hoped, that the Italian Republic would just lose the war. It's not really happening. They're doing quite well against France by the looks of things, and the whole invasion of the Reichspakt by Russia didn't develop into much in the end. They took Berlin and the surrounding area, but they couldn't defeat the combined might of Germany, Austria and Ukraine fighting as a bloc. So the fighting just kind of went on for a long time, and I just sat back on maximum speed, waiting for something to happen. The good news is that in the meantime, we've got most of the tech sorted. We actually have 5 research slots despite being a minor faction, so we do really well for tech. We're certainly keeping up with the big factions. And things eventually get to here. The same place any off-ED Hearts of Iron 4 campaign eventually goes. I get frustrated that I can't do something, and I start cheating. Here, I knew the only way to get out of my situation was to use diplomacy, so I used the cheats that unlock more diplomatic options and the cheats that forcibly make the AI do what you want, in order to do this, to make a new faction, which also requires a mod by the way, and that faction will be the Holy Roman Empire. So we are doing this right here. My sort of idea in my head, my justification, was that the Pope puts out a call to see if any Catholic nations want to come and help the cause of the Pope. We've been under siege for so long, surely somebody will crusade to Rome and save us. So I decided to ask Spain, Mexico. I was then going to ask Brazil, but it turns out they're basically dead thanks to France. They actually do exist in the corner somewhere, but they are part of the enemy alliance as it turns out. The other main faction I asked was America, less of a Catholic-style justification here, but I'm really just looking for an excuse to get them into the war so they'll come and help me. It also forces Mexico to ally to the PSA, thus meaning that border doesn't have to be manned. I grabbed a couple more of the South American states as well, but they essentially got destroyed immediately after joining the alliance and didn't achieve anything, so we won't see much more of them as it turns out. There were some more members in the new Holy Roman Empire, but mainly it's going to be Rome and then loads of places far away. In particular Spain right here, because they're on the front line. That's going to be a key battleground. And for our American allies, well, we're essentially just going to drain them. We're going to pull troops from their side of the world over to fight on our front lines to open up some more options. It's not going to be quite a gigantic crusade because they're already involved in things. They're not powerful enough to step in and change the course of the war decisively, but they can contest it a bit more. We see here Spain trying to fight with various stuff to the north. I think it's France, Germany and Italy on their border there. The issue that America's going to have, the Pacific States of America, is that by sending all of those divisions off, they actually start losing their war with the combined syndicates of America, the socialist version. So we're going to see our ally gradually get whittled away by their local enemies. We've kind of ruined it for them, but it's not about them, it's about us. There are going to be more troops over here fighting the Italians and potentially defending Rome as well, because some of their divisions will set up right here underneath mine. In fact, I don't really need all of my troops here anymore, so I'm going to try and send some of them over to Spain to help in the war, which isn't going very well by the looks of things. Also not going very well is my attempt to move over there. For whatever reason, I really couldn't get my guys to use the docks. You have to click quite precisely to turn a move order into a move by sea order. You have to click on a dock. For whatever reason, I couldn't get it to work, but I eventually did get some troops over to Spain, and then we start fighting this invasion from the south. There are lots of nice pockets to close off and destroy enemy divisions here, so this is all very nice. Whether we can actually achieve anything in this conflict is questionable, because what we need to do is defeat everybody. We're at war with the Communists and the Rights Pact, and I think we might be at war with the Moscow Accord, I don't know. Essentially, everybody involved in the theatre around us are probably going to have to get taken out for the Holy Roman Empire to succeed, and that's going to be difficult. It's also not even really what I want. I just want to conquer Italy somehow, but with the diplomatic options and the peace treaty options available, that's probably going to involve conquering the entire world for various reasons. Well, this first move actually goes pretty well. We do close off this pocket and push the enemy back into their corner down at Gibraltar. That's all very nice. Then I moved up to the north end to take some of France because they were pushing in. This is sort of a shame because now that Italy isn't here, there's less of a reason for me to invade. We just have to fight with France now to maintain the Holy Roman Empire 2.0. So here we are pointlessly fighting these guys. This is very unlikely to contribute to us taking more of Italy, my goal, as I said. I don't know if there's something I could be doing to try and bring the Italian Republic to the table to a peace treaty where I might be able to just annex them and then the rest of the wars will carry on separately. Who knows? I feel like there's not quite enough handles on this game to do exactly what you want, and most of the time nothing that you want will happen, and that's why it's often disappointing to me, especially without cheating effectively. Well anyway, looks like we're making some progress against France for what that's worth, and I think it's not worth very much. And ultimately, all of this battling here is going to come to a disappointing conclusion. I had hope because things kind of went well for a while, and I linked up with an American invasion on the west coast of France. That was looking good. However, the disgusting Brits make an appearance, invading through Portugal. They annihilate Portugal and then start annihilating Spain as well. And there are very few divisions down there, so that front line is just being freely lost. And it looks like the PSA is gradually losing on its home front war as well. I decided to redirect my troops to try and stem the advance of the Brits, and with the few extra divisions we could throw in, things got a bit better, but there are still holes in this front line, so if the AI notices, they might advance and just take more territory. I did counter-push and recapture Madrid, thinking that might be a helpful thing for us to do, although not really, because we just don't have enough troops to actually hold on this front line. And I realised I could do something else instead, because for whatever reason, back at home, the Italian Republic is severely running out of stuff. There's basically nothing back here anymore, and our allies are starting to push out and claim loads of empty territories. There must have been a gap earlier, so we're going to get in on this. I'm going to abandon our campaign in Iberia. Sorry guys, you were a sacrifice all along, but it's what God intended, I assure you. We run away and use this period of distraction to quickly take over as much of the Italian Republic as we can. So somehow this all worked out. This is what I wanted to somehow happen. I really didn't think there was a way for it to happen, and it just did while I wasn't looking. So at last we're taking everything over, and even better, the game is generously allowing me to be the occupying power. It decides who gets the territory before the peace treaty. Well, it's going to be me. So I have loads of factories now, way too many actually. We've switched from having not enough to having too many, because the division limit from Kaiserreich is still here. So now I can manufacture tons of stuff, but I'm not allowed to use it. I don't know what the justification for the division limit is. I'm guessing it's something to do with stopping the AI going insane, which it tends to do, making too many divisions and ruining the supply situation. Well, in this case, being a small faction with loads of territory doesn't work very well with this division limit, because while we control the whole peninsula, we're still forced to have a tiny army. The good news is that because it's a peninsula, we can in theory hold it for a long time with a tiny army, and that's what I am planning here. I thought this might not last, so let's make a giant wall. We'll just wall off Italy and have somewhere we can hide behind if it all goes wrong, which I predicted it would, simply because we're fighting so much stuff up here at the top. So now we just have to hold for as long as possible and get all that building done. And for now actually, it's not looking too bad. We've got Switzerland protecting our flank, so while we're being attacked from the west and east by the different alliances, Well, it's okay, we've got enough stuff there for now. Not going okay is the situation I abandoned. Our allies are being completely annihilated. The huge armies of the Holy Roman Empire are obliterated in various corners of Spain. That's going to cripple our faction's ability to do anything, and the USA/PSA is probably going to die because of this, but of course it's all a worthy sacrifice. The Third Internationale is on the rise on our doorstep, whereas the Reichspakt is looking a little bit, well, in trouble. They're kind of being eaten by the Moscow Accord, who've just conquered all around them. So this is going to effectively be the end of the Reichspakt, which is kind of good for us because they're our enemies, but they're very likely to just be replaced with a different enemy. So I don't think this is going to make a big difference to us. We just need to keep holding, keep walling Italy off to make our eternal Holy Empire on a nice, easy to defend strip of terrain. And you might be wondering, if I do this, won't I just be bombed into submission by the superior industrial power of the rest of the world? Well, yes, probably, but we're carrying on anyway. So here's some news: Vienna goes down and the Reichspakt just breaks up at this stage. So it's over for them. Our old allies have fallen, probably because we left them. Well, that's the end of that. Now a peace treaty starts because of this collapse. It's not the peace treaty I want, but more importantly, I've actually got the player-led peace treaties mod now enabled, because I enabled it while setting up the mods that would allow me to create the Holy Roman Empire faction. So, it's cheating time. Or is it? I was sort of annoyed because I didn't want to use this mod because it's so cheaty, but it's also really disappointing and sort of, in retrospect, a waste of time to not use it, and people seem to recommend that you do use it. So I don't know. I wanted to somehow do this challenge in some kind of fair-ish way, but I just don't think that's an option in this game, it seems. If you don't play exactly as the game wanted you to, then you're just quite literally not at the table. Everything is off the table for you. So I can claim all of the German Empire right now. We could become very suddenly very strong, but I didn't want to. I tried claiming just a few territories, because what I thought was that the other powers might then step in and divide up the rest of the world as they saw fit. But with the player-led mod, it's really just the player, so all of the AI factions will just not claim anything if you just pass it over to them, meaning the Reichspakt is still kind of here, just now it's neutral and not involved in the war. All of their territory gets put back. I tried to claim Ireland and Cuba. I thought those might be logical extensions to the Holy Roman Empire, kind of looking for places with a kind of Catholic vibe. That's my idea here. We actually don't get Ireland because France occupies it. We do get Cuba though, so that's something. Well, I wasn't satisfied with the result of all that, so I tried to reload the most recent save with the player-led mod disabled. However, the most recent save is in the peace conference. It saves when this happens, and even with the mod off, the effect of it is still here. So, I have to decide who gets what, and this time, I'm going to try and give territories to other factions rather than give them to me, so that it feels a bit less like cheating. Once I get bored of doing that, we have the final world situation, and you can see I've made it somewhat to my advantage. This is Mexico now, so very temporarily, the Holy Roman Empire has been slapped down onto Germany once again. Looks like I even claimed parts of Denmark for myself, so we did get some territory in the deal. But there it is, the Holy Roman Empire 2 is back. Now this is completely meaningless because if I allow time to pass, well, the fact that this territory is covered in enemy units will mean it just gets occupied immediately. And of course Mexico has no way of defending this massive patch of land miles away from its home, especially after their army died in our pointless Iberian campaign. So what I'm saying is that nothing happened, but for a period of about 3 seconds, the Holy Roman Empire existed quite gloriously, thanks to no better a mechanic than cheating, but not cheating as hard as I could have, and I think that's what God would have wanted. And now we cut to me cheating some more, because what I wanted to do was get all of the neutral powers that weren't really involved in the war, or some of them at least, to join the crusade as well, so we have some backup. This won't be very useful, but it looks nice on the map. We take over the German exiles, who control most of Africa for reasons. So there we go, we have a big amount of land mass in the Holy Roman Empire, but it's not going to do very much. Looks like Mexico somehow got kicked out of Germany, and back at it again, it's Germany. Well, that's not going to last very long either, because they're also going to get invaded by everybody. But again, the Holy Roman Empire is there. The German Empire is part of our alliance through that German government in exile thing I just set up. And now we have a peace treaty that's actually legit, and this time it's one we really want to pay attention to, and it's one where we're allowed to do something in a miraculous twist. We are in the peace negotiations for Italy. Some of it's already gone, but some of it is on the table by the time I reach the table. So we can actually start doing some negotiations. I ended up taking a lot of southern Italy, although in practice that doesn't mean much, because that was the end of some war. There's also a bunch of other wars, and in the context of those other wars I occupy most of Italy, so we still have most of it, but now some of it is like officially ours according to the World Territory Recognition System. So that's something. If the World War was to end, we'd probably get at least southern Italy into the Empire. We also have Cuba due to cheating, and for them I'm actually going to let them go. I decided to liberate them and they become an ally, which is useful. As for the other places I have the annexation decision for, I chose not to, so we're going to hold on to Italy and try to make it more firmly part of the Roman Empire. Cuba will just be an ally of the Roman Empire, and that's a good alt history scenario. This proved to be a mistake for a simple reason. While I looked at Cuba, I wasn't looking at Italy, and something went wrong in Italy while I wasn't looking. I actually haven't seen it yet as I'm playing. I'm looking at the top of the screen, I think, as I'm somehow holding on to Denmark for a while. But check out the bottom of the screen. Something's going on there. And there we go, now I've noticed it. We're in big trouble. What I think happened is the overthrow government thing was done against us, where another power plots to start a rebellion in our territory. It was probably France. And they have successfully got a rebel version of the Socialist Republic to come back. And they automatically start off with all of the territory where my defences were, and the territory behind the front line where the army is. That means the army is as good as dead all of a sudden, because we can't get out of here. We have to fight in all directions with no supplies, and we can't regen our organisation. So eventually, this pocket will be closed off, and we will lose the vast majority of our troops. So just in an instant, after things were going moderately well with only some cheating, some kind of legitimate gameplay event happened, conducted by the enemy, and we are completely screwed. So say goodbye to the Holy Roman Empire too. It's just going to be crushed at this stage. I think it's quite on theme, because it reminds me of the Crusades. Our crusade for Rome is now devolving into a battle in a city-state that's surrounded by enemies, something like the real Crusade situation. We actually lose Rome briefly and get capitulated, but we then capture it immediately because our allies are showing up at the same time and they move into the tile. We have this confusing message where I have the choice of either saying Rome is lost or Rome is finally ours. I think by losing Rome and getting it back, we've kind of gone into a resurgent Roman Empire phase, where it's as if we'd lost our territory and we finally come back to claim the Holy Land. Well, we've done it. We're going to go for finally Rome is ours. I don't know what it does, probably nothing, but we carry on as before. And with our one division now showing up to fight, and with our allies here as well, we're going to hold this tiny pocket around the Holy City and lose virtually everything else. So the golden days are over, no more factories for us. We've got our pocket. The Third Internationale is doing pretty well. They're taking over Europe. The situation has simplified, I guess. It's really a war between the East and the West, the Third Internationale versus the Moscow Accord. I noticed Brazil isn't involved in the World War at the moment. Would be a good time to cheat and get them to join my faction as I originally wanted, but I decided not to. Although it's not obvious, I do prefer to not cheat if possible. I just often judge it to not be possible. Well, here we are in a difficult situation, and there's one way to get out of it. Cheating, what do you know? This is a cheat that I quite like, because I feel like it's very justified. The cheat that allows you to change your national focuses. Because one thing you can't do in the game is undo a national focus. So in this case, loads of stuff was cut off from me, because I didn't do reformed temporal power right at the start. So the idea is we allowed some of our power to be transferred to the Senate of Rome so he could rule as the Roman Republic. But what we're going to imagine now is that the Pope steps in and starts bringing all that power back into the papal conclave. Now we're going to be more theocratic, essentially, and this unlocks some different focuses which I'm now going to just take. The advantage to doing this, and the main reason, is that a couple of them give you some free divisions. So suddenly our army is back. We also have, for some reason, a way higher division limit. We can deploy 28 divisions now, so I don't know what's different. Maybe the cheating has influenced things, but we're starting to overcome the Kaiserreichness of this situation as well. We give all of the volunteers some engineers, field hospitals and artillery, so they can dig in and help defend this city. We've got guys pouring from every corner. These disgusting heathens will not be bringing down this crusade so easily by the looks of things, and indeed we have so many troops that we might as well advance, because there isn't enough combat width, the legendary stat, to actually use all of these divisions on this front line. So we attack and we are able to push out and make effectively a bigger block that we're stuck inside. But this is useful because just having this extra little bit of territory gives us like double or triple the number of civilian factories just because there's some stuff in it. And with that, there's some plausibility that we could hold on for long enough to fortify this location and make it so we can hold on for even longer. But what is the overall strategy? Well, it's similar to what we tried to do when we were in a similar situation earlier. That being, we just sit here, try not to die, and hope that the Third Internationale loses for some reason, that they're invaded and defeated by somebody else, and all these guys next to us will just go away, which, to be fair, actually did work somehow against the Italian Republic in the end. As you can see, we are facing naval invasions. We lose some territory briefly there. Naval invasions aren't so bad if they don't actually attack Rome, because it just gives you a chance to kill an enemy division. But I tried to defend all of the coast, and I put coastal forts in as well. So now we hang on. The naval invasions just kept on coming, as we can see there. There are plenty of unengaged nations that are going to be very free to just constantly naval invade us in this little patch. But it's going to be really easy to defend, so we've got lots of winnable battles. I'm even so confident I'm trying to train the new militia on the front line. Very dangerous, because if the enemy attack, they'll be screwed over. But they probably won't. That's the plan, and it's actually working by the looks of things. Now we wait and see if we somehow win eventually. Top tier strategy. We did have some trouble. We were teetering on the edge. You can see we got pushed right back to Rome, where now we have all of our allies' unsupplied divisions here, which makes us much weaker because in the fights, they might be put into the combat before we do. They'll lose before our RNG reinforcement goes through, and then we could just all get deleted because of that. Well, luckily we push out to get a tiny bit more space. That's much easier to hold on, this two-tile setup, especially because our allies are supplied. And then the fighting is just absolutely continuous. We sit back and fight from sea and land over and over again. They are determined to take Rome. A while later, they get us back to a single tile. They're doing okay here, and while it's not shown, we are being bombed into oblivion by, I think it was like 5,000 enemy planes. So it's not represented on the map, a classic confusion, a classic complaint that I have about this game. We're in a terrible situation, even though the UI right now is telling us that we're winning all these battles. We're winning at enormous cost, and all of our infrastructure is getting taken out as well. So, our wait for somebody to save us carries on, and basically, the rest of the war really didn't have very much going on in it at all. The Moscow Accord wasn't achieving anything, and back over with the old PSA, well, they're slowly getting taken out by both Britain and the CSA. But this is good for me, because you might have seen me there trying to see if I could get peace with France, who lead the Third Internationale. We actually can't ask for peace because we weren't losing enough, because the PSA still existed. After they've been beaten down, I'm finally allowed to ask for peace. The issue is, again, the lack of diplomatic options in the game. We can't negotiate anything, we can't call a peace conference. All we can do is say, do you want to stop killing us? They say no, and that's all the negotiation that's possible. So nothing happened, basically. We need a way to talk our way out of this, and some ways I think exist in the game, but you can't do them in normal gameplay anyway. Where this eventually ends up is here. After the PSA gets taken downtown, there was a gigantic freeze. I actually AFK'd, so I didn't see how big this freeze was, but in my recording, it froze for 10 whole minutes. This is a quality bit of lag right here, and I've seen something like this happen before, just not to this extent. It means the AI is doing a peace conference, and it processes the whole thing on the same frame or something, so the game just freezes while the AI is having its conference, and we have to wait. A while later, it's given up on the music, but it did eventually come back. At this stage, I was in the room looking at it being frozen, wondering if it was doing a gigantic peace conference. Well, here's what they decided at the conference to which I wasn't even invited. I lose. Well, I suppose that was a good decision from them. Whatever the result was, it just decided to kick me out of the campaign. So that was how we unceremoniously just lost. We did not actually lose our territory. We held on to our little 2-region area the whole time for many years, winning countless battles. We ran out of fuel. We almost ran out of people, although I hadn't gone through the whole conscription system yet, so I could have got more people if I wanted to. But ultimately, somebody else decided we don't exist, and so we don't in the game's logic. In fact, they decided that we're Albania now. That is a big peace treaty concession that we were forced to make. So Rome is just gone. It's been replaced by our old rival, the Socialist Republic of Italy. They are back. Looks like France is also sort of here as well. They've got a little bit of the deal. Well, that's that. And the war is over, although the larger war between the Third International and the Moscow Accord continues. And this world setup looks primed for some action actually. The World War III scenario that's already taking place is going to be pretty cool, but we're not going to be involved in it. We've got a gigantic war between two huge superpowers, the Third International and the Moscow Accord, which are like really opposite things, with the Third International being either syndicalist or, in the cases of their faction leaders, France, anarchist, and the Moscow Accord being effectively monarchist, some very old school guys. And then around the edges we've also got the fairly powerful co-prosperity sphere, the Japanese Empire effectively, who are, I suppose, some sort of fascism, and they aren't involved in this war, but of course they're going to be the wild card that could get involved and really change things up. And then there's the Entente as well, hanging on various corners, not doing very much. Well, there you go. Looks like there's going to be one gigantic showdown for the fate of the world right here. However, the game kicked us out, and I was like, well, I guess I'll just leave. I was somewhat interested in just being like, well, okay, it's time for Albania to conquer the entire world, if that's where the game's decided to put me. However, the main thing that stopped me from playing on is that, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a really long time to open the game. And that really is a deal breaker for my playstyle, because I actually play in short bursts. Like at the end of each day, I play a little bit towards my campaign footage gathering. And a lot of that short burst is taken up by waiting for the game to open. I don't know why, but as I said before, it's the hardest to open game I've ever played. The only rival thing would be Total War Warhammer 1, if you play that not on an SSD. It can take something like 10 minutes to open a campaign, to just load it from the desktop. In this case, this mod has the problem. The game doesn't have the problem, because I've very happily played tons of other mods in Hearts of Iron. I don't know what it is about Kaiserreich, but it just is not happening on my PC at the very least, and that was annoying me. So with all of this bad luck combined, the campaign comes to an end in what can only be called a disastrous failure, but if you were looking very closely at some point in the middle, perhaps around the point I was cheating, it was going well for about 5 seconds, and I mean that quite literally. So that's something, that's the takeaway. It looks like the world did not want a theocratic Holy Roman Empire to resurge and take over. It either wants the Tsar to rule everything, or they want to rule themselves in some sort of crazy anarchist fashion that nobody understands. So they can just fight over that for a while. They'll probably all die, and then there'll be a peace conference lag so great that it lasts until the end of the universe, and that will be that. This is the Pope's final prophecy. Screw you guys, you're all gonna die anyway. I'm out of here. And that's also gonna be my message to Hearts of Iron 4 and the Kaiserreich mod. See you next time. Thanks for all the naval invasions and crazy numbers. I sort of enjoyed it in a strange way, but I have decided I never want to enjoy it in that strange way again. I'm out of here too.